Good morning. Today is Monday, February 5th, 2024. A few years ago in Nottingham, England, they had a problem with a rising rate of domestic violence. So the Nottingham City Council decided on an approach to take to this problem. And what they did is they supplied the police with knives that had a blunt edge, not a sharp edge. So any woman who either had suffered domestic abuse or felt that she was in danger of domestic abuse could switch the kitchen knives that she had. Instead of having knives with a sharp point, she could get one of these knives that had a rounded point that would presumably make it less dangerous for her. That was the initiative of the town of Nottingham, England. Jessica Eaton, who's a psychologist who works in the area of domestic abuse, wrote that when she first read about this, she thought it was a joke. And it sounds like a joke, because the problem in domestic abuse is not the sharpness of the knife. The problem is male violence. Just having a different kind of knife is not going to help with the problem of male violence. This is a serious societal problem throughout, including in our community. And it's a problem that our Torah portion, the Parsha Mishpatim, clearly addresses. In our Parsha, we have a standard of how a husband should treat his wife. The same is true for a wife treating her husband, but it's formulated in the Talmud, and it's formulated in the format of advice of a husband to a wife. Ohev es ishto kegufo. A husband is required to love his wife as much as he loves himself. Umachabda yoser megufo, but to show greater honor to her than he shows to himself. In our Torah portion, we have a prohibition of a husband, God forbid, hitting a wife, God forbid, or hitting anyone else for that matter. It is a clear biblical prohibition. It is actionable in court. Even raising a hand in anger, which is an action that is known as menacing, to act in a menacing manner, even without physical contact, says the Talmud, Nikra Rasha, such a person is called a wicked person, an evil person. It's prohibited to act in such a manner. And it certainly is not fulfilling Machabda Yoser Megufo, to honor his wife more than he honors himself. He would certainly not want that done to him, and therefore he certainly may not do that to someone else. Our Torah portion also clearly prohibits verbal abuse, insulting, calling names, reducing self-esteem. The Talmud says, Ein adam dar im nachash bekfifa achas. A person is not expected to live together with a snake in one basket. No one is expected to live with someone who makes them suffer, someone who makes them miserable. No one is expected to live like that. And so if a person is making another person suffer, they are violating mitzvos in this week's Torah portion. I know that there's a myth about this in certain parts of the Jewish world, So I want to say this very, very clearly. There is no idea, no Jewish source anywhere which either existed in the past or exists in the present that a husband is allowed to discipline his wife or to do with her as he pleases because she is his. There is no source for that. Nowhere in Judaism, in authentic Judaism, do we find that. Unfortunately, we do find that attitude among Jews, Nebuch, as we find that attitude in the wider society. But there is no Jewish source for it, and it is absolutely prohibited. Ein adam dar im nachash bekfifa achas. A person should not be forced to live together with someone that makes them miserable. Many years ago, I had the difficult opportunity, but the privilege to be speaking with a woman who confided in me that she was being abused by her husband, and I was trying to help her. It has been a major part of my work since the beginning of my career. But this time, this woman said to me something that I will never forget. She said, you know, the bruises that he inflicts on me, the broken bones that he causes through his hitting, that's not as bad as the insults and the put downs and the constant criticism. Because she said, bruises heal, bones heal, but the sting of those words remains. Sometimes we may have an image when we hear about a case of domestic abuse. We may ask the question, well, did he hit her? Was there physical violence? Now, of course, that question is appropriate because, of course, that could easily lead to the serious injury or death of the woman, which tragically does happen. But in terms of evaluating the seriousness of the abuse, it's irrelevant. The Torah tells us at the beginning of Bereshit that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were created as adults. They're created as adults. And that means, and they were the first married couple. And what we learn from that is in marriage, we are required to treat the other person as an adult. And so therefore, any kind of behavior that is controlling behavior, if one tries to control the behavior of the other, that's not treating the other person as an adult. That's not treating the other person as if they have the right and the ability to make their own decisions. Or another prevalent practice within this terrible scenario is isolating behavior, where often it's a husband will isolate his wife from others. Don't spend time with them. I want to know who you're talking to. I don't want you visiting your family or visiting with your friends. That type of isolating behavior also is not treating the other person as an adult. And especially words that are put downs, that are insults, that that have their purpose to reduce the self-esteem of the other person. That's not treating the other person as an adult. That's not treating the other person with honor greater than the honor you want to be shown to yourself. And it is prohibited. And this is just as serious, if not more serious, than the blows and the bruises and the broken bones, God forbid. And this is the underlying theme of our Parsha, expressed in many different ways, in many different mitzvos throughout our Parsha. And the effect that it has on a person to be the victim of this, the recipient of this, it causes what is hard for anyone else not going through it to understand. One woman described her experience like this, and this reflects the experience of many women in these circumstances. She said, I'm quoting now from an article that appeared a few years ago in the Montreal Gazette, written by Susan Schwartz. She said, you're reading a book, and he says, you're too stupid to read. So we stop reading. If you make sunny side eggs, he throws them at you because he wanted the eggs cooked a different way. If we put on makeup, we're whores. If we wear no makeup, we're not looking after ourselves. It gets so we don't know how to dress anymore or even how to drink our coffee. We stop going out. We lose our identity. They take from us who we are, all our power to make decisions. They cut us off from the world, and the isolation is a prison. We become ghosts of who we were. A few years ago, there was a television series on Netflix with the title Made, M-A-I-D, Made. I urge you to watch this series. First of all, it's an adult series, and it deals with very difficult subjects. Parts of it are very difficult to watch. But it's gripping, and it's compelling, and it is brilliantly written and acted. It captures the experience of so many women in a way that is so real. Again, if you're able to do it, I urge you to see it. Made. It's on Netflix. So the story follows a woman named Alex, and she's a woman, she has a young daughter, and this woman, Alex, leaves an abusive relationship, and she gets a job cleaning houses. That's why it's called maid. She's a maid. She works as a maid. Even though she is experiencing violence, she does not initially identify as someone who is abused because she is not being hit. There's one unforgettable scene that so precisely captures the mindset of many women in this situation. She meets a social worker, and the social worker, after hearing her story, urges her to come into the shelter where she will be safe. And Alex says, I would hate to take a bed from somebody who was abused for real. So the social worker says, what is that? What does it mean to be abused for real? And Alex says, beaten up, hurt. And the social worker says, and what does fake abuse look like? Intimidation, threats, control. And she says to Alex, you need to call the domestic violence hotline yourself. Alex says, what do I say? Help. You need help. Linda Parienti is a woman that I have the privilege to work with often. She works at Auberge Shalom here in Montreal. an organization devoted to assisting and protecting women who are at risk or who are suffering from domestic abuse of every variety. And she says, we often see women who don't recognize they are abused. A week does not go by without a client saying, I don't know if I should be accepting your services. But that's the reason that they, Ober Shalom, want to create awareness. We want to end the feeling of it being a big secret. And this happens to me so many times that a woman will come to speak to me privately and she'll describe to me what's going on in her marriage. And it is clear, it's obvious, it's clear that she is being abused, that this is actual domestic abuse. And so often, the woman that I'm speaking to does not recognize it. What do you mean? I should go to a berge, I should go to a shelter, I should call a counselor. That's not for me. I'm not being abused. This is marriage. This is the way it's supposed to be, right? To not recognize that marriage is not supposed to be like running a gauntlet. It's not supposed to be a context of anger and abuse and mistreatment and put downs. That is abuse. And I've had this experience so many times where women who are clearly suffering from it, and they just don't see themselves as being abused. But anyone who would objectively hear of what they are going through, what their daily lives are like, would see it. One of the counselors at Auberge said, women come through the door at Auberge, and often they're terrified. They ask, what am I doing here? And that's so common because for many women, they never in their lives imagined that they would end up at a place like Auberge Shalom, who's helping women dealing with domestic abuse. Do I belong here? I'm just not in this category. It's at that moment you take to connect to that person and you say, you can breathe here. This is a safe place. And it's incredibly powerful. We see people who haven't seen safety for such a long time. And here's a critical point. This was made by another expert in domestic abuse, Joanne Turgeon. Conjugal violence, domestic abuse, is not a couple conflict. It's not about the couple not getting along. It is the control of one over the other. And it can happen to anyone. What's unfortunate is that so often in our society, we look down on women who experience conjugal violence because we think of them as inferior or weak or at fault. But that's not correct, because conjugal violence, domestic abuse, happens in every community against every type of woman. She says, it's me, it's you, it's all of us, it's not someone else. The women who suffer from domestic abuse are women from all walks of life, all classes in society, all levels of education, all levels of income, all religions. Stephanie Land is the woman who wrote the memoir that inspired the Netflix show Made. And she wrote, I felt so horrible about myself every second of the day. And he made me believe that I was mentally ill and that I was crazy. Combating this in all its forms is a theme that runs through our Torah portion. And it is the task of every woman and every man in our society to work to combat it. If you or someone you know is experiencing this, or you think they might be experiencing this, but you are unsure, call Ober Shalom. Call me. Call an expert who works specifically in this area. This is not for a marriage counselor. This is not for a rabbi who is trying to help, or a rebbitzin who's trying to help with shalom bayis. This is a different issue. This is an issue where one person has a problem with anger, with controlling, and it needs specialized help. It needs professional help. And if this is happening, a person has to confront it, to recognize what they may never have imagined, that they are in this situation. Ein adam dar im nachash b'kfifa achas. A person is not expected to live together with someone who makes them miserable. That's not okay. That's not how it's supposed to work. And if that is the case for you or someone you know, they need help, specialized help. And here's the point. Help is available. Safety is available. God hears their cries, and we hear their cries. And we want to help. My friends, I wish you a good day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.